us to commit all that is in our hearts and souls and lives to your merciful care. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Please be seated. There's a lot going on in these 6 verses. Jesus is teaching about forgiveness and repentance. Jesus is teaching about faith. Jesus is teaching about the mindset of discipleship. Leave it to Jesus to say so much in just a few words. I'm going to focus us on the last part of the gospel. And then I'm going to introduce Valerie Griego from ABQ FaithWorks, and she's going to talk to us about what's being done in Albuquerque to address the issue of homelessness. So we get to the last verse, or verses, of the gospel passage. And if you think that Jesus got people's heads spinning when he made the comment about the mulberry tree, he certainly gets their heads spinning even faster when he says, "Who among you with slaves is going to tell the slave coming in from the field, 'Here, I'm going to make dinner and serve you'?" Jesus knows that would never happen. He wants to get his listeners' attention because his next lesson is so essential. What Jesus is saying is, regardless of your stature in life, what's the reason you do what you do? Regardless of your stature in life, what's the reason you do the right thing, the loving thing, the merciful thing? And in the extreme example that Jesus is giving, it's like he's saying, do the right thing. Do what is loving and just and merciful because it's the right thing to do. Do it to do it. Do what is loving because it is loving. Don't do it for winning points that are redeemable at the pearly gates, because it doesn't work that way. And don't do it because you think that God is some kind of, raging ogre who needs to be pacified. And don't do it so that others will praise you. Jesus is saying, do the loving thing. Do the right thing. Because that's what I do. And if you want to follow me, follow my example. Do the loving thing as a way of expressing your faith. Expressing our faith by doing what is loving, just, and merciful is living as a disciple. Expressing and growing our faith by doing the right thing is evangelizing. You've all heard our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, say that you want to make Episcopalians really nervous, you go up and you ask them if they're saved. The other thing that Michael Curry says is that if you want to make Episcopalians really nervous, you ask them, when was the last time you did some evangelization? When were you out there evangelizing? He calls himself the chief evangelizing officer of the Episcopal Church. Evangelizing doesn't have to be preaching from the fountains at the middle of campus or out here on the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. and University. Evangelizing is living in such a way that people can sense that our hearts are rooted in the love of Jesus, that we're doing what is the right thing, the just thing, the merciful thing, because we do it, because that's what Jesus did, and that's what Jesus continuously commissions us to do. So there's this beautiful prayer that captures this, and I'm just going to read a couple of lines because they really resonate for me. Maybe they'll resonate for you. I hope they will. Let me preach you without preaching, not by my words, but by my example, by the catching force of what I do, the evident fullness of the love my heart bears to you, Jesus. So I'd like to challenge us in this coming week to choose very intentionally to preach Jesus without preaching, by doing what is loving and just and merciful because it is the right thing to do, because it is the Jesus thing to do. Now Valerie Griego is going to talk to us about how we can engage doing the Jesus thing with other communities and organizations who are addressing homelessness. Valerie, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Hello. It's nice to see you all today. Thank you so much for having me today. So, as she said, my name is Valerie Griego. I am the Social Services Coordinator for Albuquerque FaithWorks Collaborative. So Albuquerque FaithWorks Collaborative is a group of 8 churches, St. Thomas being one of them. You all are my 8th church I get to visit and work with and learn from to figure out how we're going to do this thing we're doing together, these things. So a conversation started a couple years ago between these 8 communities. I think some of you all, at least first service, as well, mentioned to me that you were part of some of those initial conversations that we had about how do we work together better, how do we do this together better. So these 8 churches got together, St. Thomas being one of them, started asking questions about how we can work smarter rather than harder, how we can collaborate more and figure out maybe what other churches are doing that's working for them, what is St. Thomas doing that's working for you all. Some church communities are asking, what can I do that's something that's different? What can I do that maybe another church community is doing? Can I replicate that here? Those were some of the initial conversations that people were having. And so Albuquerque FaithWorks pulled some money together and decided that the first thing that they would do is hire a social services coordinator, so that's me. My job from June to now, and moving forward also, is to be able to learn from each of those communities, including St. Thomas, to figure out how we can do that together. So I want to talk a little bit about what I've been doing from June to now. I've gotten to go out to each of the 8 communities. I've gotten to visit some of the events that each of those 8 communities are doing. Some churches provide a meal for people. Some people are providing certain small outreach things like hygiene or blessing bags. Some churches are doing, you'll prepare a meal and go to a specific place that offers services or support for people who are in need. Some of the things I personally have been doing is we have people that come to our doors at each of the 8 churches every single day, right? And so I come out to the churches. I'll often speak to people on the phone. I'll talk about what services are available in the community for different things. It could be something like housing, like eviction prevention. It could be something like basic social services needs for people. When I meet with a person or people, groups of people, we'll often talk about what people need, what's available in the community, and where some of the gaps are. And so the individuals that I meet with, I've got about 18 that I'm working with consistently right now. Of those 18, there's probably close to 90 others that I've talked to about what's available in the community, what they can access. I'm also doing orientation groups, so I've done a couple. I did a couple in September where we have direct conversations about how to help people in the community. What does a person who's unhoused look like, and how to work better with people. How do we create relationships with people? And so a couple other things that I'm doing is we've done a couple of tours to the West Side Emergency Shelter, this is the first 12-month period ever that it's been open 365 days. So we just crossed over that 12-month period where it's open year-round. It used to just be the West Side Shelter, and winter, just used to be winter. So now it's 12 months. We just finished our 12th month of being open for the whole year. And so, and we can talk a little bit more about the details of that during coffee hour. There's a specific bond that's coming up that we all get to vote on in a month or so that talks specifically about moving the West Side Shelter closer into town. It's currently 22 miles west. So talk about like out of sight, out of mind kind of thinking. It's definitely really far. We'll do one more tour now in the fall, and then we'll move on and maybe do some more in the spring. I'm going to be doing a book club. Probably, I would say of all of the 8 communities that I've been to, all 8 communities are asking, are we helping? Are we hurting? Does sometimes helping hurt? At what point do we draw that line? We might be doing the thing, but are we helping? Are we helping? Right? There's a scripture about fish and teaching people how to fish, right? Are we giving fish? Are we teaching people how to fish? Right? So that's the bigger question, you know, are we helping or hurting is probably the number one question that all 8 communities are asking. The second thing most communities are asking is, or the next theme that people have going on is, all of the 8 churches have had someone spend the night on the church grounds, either people they know about or people they don't know about. So how do we feel about that? What do we think about that? How do we do that? So we're talking about those things as well. So I'm available Sunday through Thursday. I meet with people one-on-one. I meet with groups of people. I talk to lots of people on the phone about what's available, what can they do, what's not available, where the gaps are. And then we've been doing the tours. We're going to do a book club. So it's just having bigger conversations about how do we work smarter rather than harder? How do we work together? What else is out there? What's working in other places that could possibly work here in Albuquerque? We'll talk a little bit during coffee hour also about some eviction prevention programs that are working in different parts of the country that might work here. We'll also talk about safe parking lots, where the conversation is about trying to create and have space for people that's in a safe area, with boundaries and guidelines and things that can kind of help us figure out how we can do this. And we know that in working together, we're much stronger, we're much better in talking to each other and connecting with other communities and figuring out how we can do this in a better way. And so those are the main points of what we're doing within ABQ FaithWorks Collaborative. We have some really, really tough tasks, really big things that we don't have all the answers to, right? There's not one way to do things. There's a lot of different ways to do a lot of different things, but by at least just having that conversation with someone or with people and with each other, we can really figure out how to do this in a way that's better for people. And so I'll be available to answer questions, to talk about the bond further if you all want to know more about the bond. We can talk about specific things that I've done, specific things that I'm, having some struggles with and trying to kind of figure out how to do this. But my goal here today is really to just be a resource for you all, be able to answer questions that you might have, and to talk about what can we do, what direction can we move in together. Faith communities are often the first place people stop, right? And so the question there is, why? This is a place maybe we trust, maybe it's in our neighborhood, maybe it's an environment where we know we'll have someone that might listen to us. And so we should capitalize on that and really figure out, can we help people in a way that's different and better? So that's kind of what we're currently doing, the direction that we're moving, and we'll definitely have some time during coffee hour to talk more about that.
What's the book?
The book is called Toxic Charity, and so it's not on the schedule yet, but it will be in the coming weeks, which just really talks about, am I helping or am I hurting, right? At what point are we enabling, and at what point are we really making a bigger impact on people? And my hope for that conversation is for us to figure out what some of those intricacies are, and maybe what we're currently doing in our community that's not so helpful, and talking about what can be more helpful.
Has the city come up with an alternative site for the West Side Shelter?
Not a specific site, but word on the street is that they want it to be somewhere near UNM. That's our community, right? All of the 8 churches that I'm working with are all surrounding UNM. So it's important for us to figure that out. Many neighborhoods are saying, not in my neighborhood, not in my backyard, right? Many neighborhoods are saying, we don't have the capacity for hundreds of people in our community, but what do we have the capacity for then? What can we do then? Let's talk about that, So not a specific site, not a specific one place, but there's a conversation about it being closer to services. And so that's a start, because I'll tell you what, 22 miles out, I think the nearest gas station is 5 miles from that site, which is far, When we do the tours, we met and we carpooled because it's far. And so we met and drove out together, and it was much more helpful for us to go together. So not a specific site, but definitely not 22 miles out. Somewhere that's closer to services, closer to people. So
That could impact UNM and us.
that's right, it could. So it's just, I think the good part about bringing the shelter closer is access to services. They're gonna have to be strategic about how they do it, and it needs to happen regardless of whether it's near UNM or somewhere else. It needs to be closer so that we can access services and so that people can get the help that they need. So that's kind of where we're at. But I look forward to talking with you all further and being a resource for you. That's my number one priority, because I'm not going to make a significant enough impact alone. This isn't about a Valerie thing. This is about let's talk together and talk about how we can do it in a way that's collaboratively. That speaks directly to our name, right? Albuquerque Faith Works Collaborative. We're 8 faith communities that said we're helping, but we don't know if we're really helping. We're faith communities and we often have people that come here first. So let's talk about and figure out how to do things in a way that's more collaborative. So I'm happy to take maybe one more comment. Anyone wants to know anything that's burning that you might forget? You can also write it down. Yeah.
I think I heard that it costs the city $1 million for the bus contract to take people daily.
Yep.
To the shelter, and
That's
people
true.
then come back in
Back
the
to
morning.
the city. Yep. So can
They-
anyone
they
think
can't
of
stay
what?
there.
Can anyone think of what they might do with $1 million? Because I can think of about 100 things. So that's true. $1 million to go from the city to the shelter and back.
$1 million a year.
A year. $1 million a year. I can think of a whole lot of things I want to do with $1 million. So let's figure it out. Let's figure out how to do it. That's my challenge.
Do you have any idea what the rationale was to move the shelter out 22 miles?
I honestly don't know that there was like a decision that was like, let's put it 22 miles. I don't know if it was like based on that. I think it was space. There was a space available in a building that was no longer being used, and it was thought that, you know, let's use this space rather than have this vacant space out in the middle of nowhere. I think that's where it came from. And then over time, right, it was fast, it was available, it's really far, but it was fast and available, you know, so I think that was the original thought. I don't think it was, you know, fully thought out in terms of all the other parts and all the other barriers that we see, but in general, the thought was that it's a location that's available.
Or segregation would get these
That's
people-
very possible, very
Yeah,
possible.
yeah.
Right.
And,
But let's talk about it because
is the whole idea to reintegrate these folks back into the society, or warehousing?
there's many questions that we can think of,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Because if we don't reintegrate them into the society, we're going to be facing this problem forever.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like doing you out of a job, but
It's okay. You know what? I'll end with this because I think I'm out of time probably.
no, I mean,
Yeah, but I'll end with this. When I was a very young social worker, like 18 and just graduated high school, my first mentor and still a dear friend of mine said, you know you're doing a good job in social work if you work yourself out of a job. So I kind of live by that. So if I can create and help and be a part of something that helps me to help people figure things out in a better way, and I don't have a job as a result of that, like sign me up.
unfortunately, it seems that there's a segment of those involved to keep their jobs going rather than
Not for me.
eliminating jobs.
I am the first to tell you, if I work myself out of a job, I will be so excited to do something different, and that doesn't mean I don't love my job. I wouldn't do this for 20 years if I didn't love my job. But my job is to help and walk alongside people to figure out how to do things in a different way. It's not for job security, because believe me, in 20 years, I have not once had trouble finding a job.
There's an endless opportunity to do this. We're
Yeah.
not going to run out of people.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. I'll be available during coffee hour. I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to talk today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Continuing our prayer, let us turn to page 358 in the Red Book of